Before we start today's video, I just want to say that if you are in Toronto, I am a part of a TWILIGHT screening. I just want to promo it because we're talking about fan culture and fanfic today and like the cultural relevance of TWILIGHT as cinema. There's merit there and we will be discussing it. It is basically an interactive TWILIGHT watch-a-thon. We're going to be watching the first TWILIGHT movie, which is Outer Cinema, commenting along with it, playing drinking games, playing like shout and response games. It's basically going to be like if we hosted a Rocky Horror Picture Show screening for TWILIGHT. It is happening Friday, November 18th at 9 p.m. at the Hot Dog Cinema. I'm going to put the link in the description below, and it is free if you are under 25. Hi, today we are talking about the fanfiction to published book pipeline. This is kind of a thing that I feel like we've seen in recent years in publishing, in culture, where basically incredibly popular books and series are written first in the form of fanfiction. They're not written as like original pieces of media. You know, when we have these images of writers, it's like they're dark academia, tweed blazer, sitting in a cafe, writing on a typewriter or whatever. These are not these writers, or maybe it is. You know, maybe you cracked out the typewriter and the tweed blazer to write Captain America and Iron Man fanfic. I don't know. I find this interesting because I feel like fanfiction is so goddamn loaded. So grab your tea. Grab your cardigan, Y/N. Put your hair in a messy bun, Mary Sue, and let's strap in and let's talk about what happens when fan fiction gets published as just a regular ass novel. I thought we'd just take a quick break and talk about this video's sponsor, Geology. Geology creates simple and effective skincare and hair care routines customized just for you, with ingredients that are proven to work. Geology is branching out from their award-winning skincare and have created their custom control hair care line with a brand new co-wash. If you're thinking, what is a co-wash? You're not alone. I didn't know before this. Co-wash is a specially formulated cream cleanser that removes buildup and cleanses the hair without all that lather, harsh ingredients, or stripping the hair of its natural oils. Co-wash uses friction to remove dirt and grime from your hair and scalp, so it keeps your hair clean and healthy without damaging it in the process. Their co-wash is available in two formulas: cooling hair co-wash with tea tree and aloe, and smoothing hair co-wash with coconut and avocado. They're great for all hair types and they are color safe. And this was great for me because I bleach my hair. I want to keep it healthy and not super dry so it doesn't break off. I've also been using Geology skincare as of late. Their skincare helps you fight acne, reduce oiliness, combat dark or puffy under eyes, and just in general have smoother, hydrated skin. I love their eye cream. You use it to treat dark circles, but honestly I just find it very soothing and cooling, especially when I wake up in the morning. I just like how it feels. Sometimes it's pretty easy to get overwhelmed with skincare. There's so many options these days, and Geology makes it super easy. You can just go on their website and take a diagnostic quiz, and their team of dermatologists will create a customized routine just for you and send it right to your doorstep. So if Geology sounds good to you, go to the link in my description or head to geology.com and use the code UNCARLY70. You can take their free hair care and skincare diagnostics quiz and get 70% off skincare and 30% off their co-wash. Again, go to geology.com or click the link in my description below and use the code UNCARLY70 and get 70% off your 30-day skincare trial, as well as 30% off their co-wash. In defense of fanfiction, I feel like I have to say this before we get started because a lot of like rhetoric on the internet specifically about fanfiction is overwhelmingly negative. That is not to say that in this video I am going to be holding back punches. No, if fanfiction were manifested in a human form, I would be proverbially meeting it in the parking lot of a Denny's to throw fists. I'm physically fighting the concept of fanfiction today, and I brought brass knuckles. Like, I'm ready to go. That being said, last January, during a depressive episode, did I read a 500,000 word, 188 chapter Harry Potter fanfiction. Absolutely. Like, I've been in the trenches, so I can make these comments. Fight me on it. Fight me. I'm making fun of fan fiction and breaking it down and criticizing it because it is something that I've enjoyed. Like, fan fiction is funny, and I'm not gonna yuck your yum if you enjoy it. Enjoy what you want and live your life. Like, the world is going to explode. The collapse of society is in the air. So enjoy what you want to enjoy. I just think it's funny that in the year of our Lord 2022, I can find copious amounts of fan fiction in which a drug addict will sell her child to One Direction in order to purchase crack cocaine. Like, that's a trope. It's not like one story exists. That's a genre of fan fiction, and that's funny. But I will say this in defense of fan fiction. Fan culture on the internet right now, especially, it's a space that is predominantly queer, and like most things that are incredibly lucrative, very popular, and drive what is culture in our modern day, it's consumed by young women. Like, teenage girls decide what makes money, what is culturally relevant, what is popular. They are the motherfucking tastemakers of culture as we know it. And that's why fan culture and fan fiction is made fun of. I don't know for sure, but it smells a bit like misogyny. I think it might be a little bit of misogyny. I think that sometimes the conversation of fan fiction is often dictated by like a little bit of misogyny, a little bit of sexism. I also think fan fiction is a really interesting case of like queering the canon. The majority of fan fiction written online, not all of it, but so much of it features queer relationships. So much media is just overwhelmingly straight, and queer audiences want to see themselves reflected in the media that they consume. And if authors aren't going to give them that, they're going to write some fan fiction about it. Like, for example, and this is just hypothetical, if you read a children's fantastical book series and you loved it growing up and it really affected you, and the author, just as an example, started to parrot harmful, bigoted, transphobic words and ideas on Twitter, if you yourself are a trans person who this world meant a lot to, would it not feel good to reclaim the story in the world by writing fan fiction in which you yourself are represented? It's like the height of death of the author. You're taking back the piece of literature in and of itself. Or again, just hypothetical, if this same children's book, the only queer character in a 7-book series is an old man that never once talks about being queer. It's basically not even implied that he's gay. The author just on Twitter one day is like, oh yeah, he's gay, you guys didn't know that? Because he's gay. He's a warlord. He sent children to die. Yeah. But he's gay. If you are a queer consumer of that literature, would you not want to, again, reclaim it from this bigot, TERF, fuck J.K. Rowling? Would you not want to reclaim this literature in its own light through fan fiction? It's just a very interesting case. Like, that's the defense of fan fiction in general. I just want to say that, like, because I'm about to really get into published fan fiction, and I do want to say that, like, there is cultural merit to fan fiction. Fan fiction is cringe. Or at least it gets, like, a reputation for being like low-key bad and cringe. You have to admit that a lot of fan fiction is kind of bad. Is it enjoyable? Yes. But the basis of fan fiction being enjoyable is not always that it's like well written. It's like you get to see characters that you already know about. You can basically project on them. You know what I mean? It's like when you like an actor and you can watch anything that they're in, even if they're bad, because you're like, well, I like Andrew Garfield, so I'll watch him in whatever he's in. So a lot of fan fiction is like poorly written or cliche, which is why it gets the reputation of being cringe. It's not a crime to be cringe. And also, like, fan fiction, when it's written just on the internet, it exists there for a different reason than, like, a published book. If a book is published and they're like, hey, this is literary fiction, it's very well written, and a team of editors worked on this, you're gonna pick that up because you want, like, your worldview to be rocked. You're not reading fan fiction to have your worldview rocked. You're, like, reading fan fiction because you want to read, like, Frodo and Sam having sex. It's entertainment, it's enjoyment, it's comfort. It can be a little smutty, it's porn. It operates on an entirely different level online than like it would with literature, which is why it's interesting when fan fiction does get published, because it exits this realm of like, this is just a fun thing we're all enjoying. It's kind of like bad maybe, but also like, I love it. When something is published, you're like, okay, but like a team of editors worked on this. What's going on? It's also worth saying that like fan fiction oftentimes is written poorly for a plethora of reasons. First of all, like some writers just see it as an exercise or a hobby. They're not aiming to make money off of it. They just like to write and don't want to monetize their hobby and want to have fun. They also could be literal children. Like it's so accessible
to publish fan fiction. You can just like, I could sit at my computer right now and be like, I'm gonna write for 10 minutes and whatever that is, I'm gonna upload it. Doesn't matter if it's good or bad. And then it would count towards like what fan fiction is. You can just upload it. People think fan fiction is poorly written because like statistically speaking, like, yeah, it is. But yeah, like every song every child wrote counted towards the canon of what music is, we would all be like, I guess music's bad? Barriers to entry on fanfiction are so low that like it can be bad and that's fine. Published fanfiction. Now again, I am not a fanfiction historian. I should be getting my PhD in Steve Harrington and Eddie from Stranger Things. I had to take a break, and I just had a little bit of a breakdown. Also, you can see it's literally 30 minutes later and it's incredibly dark. Seasonal depression is hitting. Let's talk about published fan fiction. The reason I kind of got the idea for this video was because in recent weeks, Anne Hathaway has been signed, or there's been a lot of press around this movie she's doing that is based on a book that is basically about Harry Styles dating a 40-year-old divorcee single mom. And I was like, is this published fan fiction? Like, let's get into it. So the movie is called The Idea of You, and it's based on a 2017 novel by the same name. I wouldn't classify this as published fan fiction in the same way I wouldn't classify another book I read this year, Funny You Should Ask, as fan fiction. That is based off of a GQ article where a journalist and Chris Evans had like a lot of chemistry. In this one, it is a romance between a divorcee and Harry Styles, but it's not about Harry Styles, it's influenced by Harry Styles or inspired by Harry Styles. The reason I wouldn't count this as published fan fiction is because it was never written online before. You know, like there's a difference between being inspired and basing one of your characters off of a famous person and publishing your 5 Seconds of Summer fanfic where Luke dates a corn dog vendor on fanfiction.net and then it gets so popular that then you publish it as a book. You know what I mean? Like these were written as original pieces of fiction with inspiration from famous people, but they weren't written as fan fiction. Before we get into the canon, I want to tell you about the 2 kinds of fan fiction that I seem to think make up the published fan fiction canon. So first we have AU, or alternate universe fan fictions. This is basically where a relationship happens, generally speaking, between 2 characters from an original work of IP, but instead of existing in the world that they are written in, where they have superpowers or magical powers or whatever, they exist in an alternate universe. This is often used to like take characters from fantastical worlds and place them in our modern world where they don't have powers or whatever. What if Harry and Draco aren't at Hogwarts and instead they meet at a coffee shop in modern day London? There's also real person fics, or RPF. This is basically a fan fiction about a real person, a celebrity, and generally speaking it's a romance taking place in like our real world. Like it's not a real world because like would Harry Styles pick a random girl out of the front row of his concert who's reading Joan Didion and take her backstage and fall in love with her? Like no. But you know what I mean? Like it's in our real world. Like the conventions and physics of our world exist, and generally speaking there's a romance between the famous person, the person the fan fiction is about, and a wish fulfillment of like the audience, meaning the love interest of this famous person is meant to fulfill the fantasy of those reading, saying like, that could be me. This is where a lot of the like not like other girls jokes and y/n your name inserts are. She's just like us, she doesn't get fame, that kind of thing. Now the timeline of published fan fiction in my world, and I'm the expert here, you're in class and I'm the motherfucking professor. The first published fan fiction of note is 2007's The Mortal Instruments by Cassandra Clare. I never read this, but it was fucking huge. Very like YA urban fantasy. I operated my whole life thinking this was Ginny and Draco fanfic, like that was the pairing. No, it's Ginny and Ron. Cassandra Clare, I will be seeking damages. What the fuck? Also, all this is alleged. Everything I'm saying in this video is alleged. I know nothing. You know what I mean? Like it's alleged. So like Cassandra Clare, do not sue me. Now I would classify the Mortal Instruments series as an alternate universe fanfiction because there is world building outside of like the world of Harry Potter and that kind of thing. Like she's created a fantasy world that is different. There is a lot of overlap with Harry Potter terms. The main characters in this book are not looking for the Deathly Hallows. They're looking for the Mortal Instruments. And they're doing this to stop Voldemort from gaining power, but instead of calling him Voldemort, his name is Valentine, which in my brain is Voldemort like this.
You better work.
Like we're queering the canon of Voldemort, and I personally love that. Another iconic published fan fiction that, I mean, we must talk about is 2011's 50 Shades of Grey by E.L. James. I would argue that this showed traditional publishers like the financial viability of fanfic writers, because this book, I'm trying to think of what the industry term would be, shat fucking money out. Like it was taking laxatives. This series made so much money. It was like a phenomenon. Why was that? Because it was sexy, easy to read, and marketed itself to women. Women wanted to read erotica, and that's what this book did. Now, 50 Shades is a updated Twilight fan fiction. It is alternate universe. Instead of Edward being a vampire, he's just a businessman. And instead of being a high schooler who's dating an 100-year-old vampire, Bella is a college graduate. Businessman Edward / Christian Grey wants to dominate Bella / Anastasia in the bedroom. I know it sounds a little silly, right? But think again. Because 50 Shades was responsible for making Random House over $200 million in 2012 alone. And the film series based off of it, right, that brought my favorite nepotism baby and wife, Dakota Johnson, to the front. Now that film series made $1.32 billion with a B. Obviously there's lucrative merit to like appealing to women's sensuality and marketing to women, right? We would be remiss to not talk about the piece of literature that is After by Anna Todd. This is a real person fanfic between an audience insert, Tessa, and Harry Styles. You might know After because this book has been torn apart by the internet. I think there's like 3 books and 3 movies, and they're all horrible. Like when people think of published fan fiction, I think a lot of people think of After because it's just, I'm trying to think of a nice way to say very poorly written. Like I haven't read it, but I've literally not heard a nice thing about it. Like I'm sure it's entertaining. Anna Todd, the author of this, originally wrote it just as fan fiction about Harry Styles. When a publisher picked it up, they changed all the names from like Harry to Harden. It's a thinly veiled. She also famously just wrote it on her phone. Again, this is where like the cracks in the published fan fiction veneer start to show. Was 50 Shades of Grey literature? No. But it seemed to be like the biggest issues with 50 Shades of Grey were like problematic depictions of BDSM. It wasn't like it was more poorly written than other published erotica, but After really set the bar. From what I've heard from other people talk about After, I will not be reading it because I can't do that to myself. Like I have suffered enough in this life. It's very poorly written. The characters are boring and unlikable. It has incredibly problematic depictions of abuse, and it is not really painted as abuse. In this book, the Harry surrogate Harden is incredibly aggressive, angry, and screams at Tessa, the main character, constantly. He doesn't let her become friends with any other guys, and if a guy talks to her, he like attacks him. There's a moment in which Harden is beating up a guy that Tessa has talked to at a party, and she's very grateful when he's beating him up outside that he's not beating him up on the concrete, because she would be afraid that Harden would kill this guy if they were on the concrete. Just normal boyfriend things. That awkward moment when your boyfriend murders any man that tries to talk to you. And I am not the kind of person that thinks that every single book that you read and enjoy has to depict healthy people and healthy relationships making good decisions. I love Sally Rooney, which is basically just like privileged, insufferable people not communicating for 300 pages. I don't think we need to read things that are only depictions of incredibly healthy, exemplary relationships. The problem with After is that it's a book marketed to young women with problematic depictions of violent, verbal, and physical abuse. And it's not presented as a depiction of an abusive relationship. It is communicated that this is a romance book and this is normal and good. They're like, actually, he is doing this because he loves her and he was abused as a child, and that makes it okay. It's also worth noting that After sold 12 million copies worldwide. Just girly things. There's been a lot of recent published fan fiction too. One of the biggest examples I can think of is Allie Hazelwood's books. She published The Love Hypothesis. And this book like went viral. Like it was on the bestseller list for like a fucking crazy amount of time. And she's a first-time author like fucking killing it in the game. The Love Hypothesis is a published Reylo fanfiction, which is a ship from Star Wars between Rey and fascist warlord Kylo Ren. I have read The Love Hypothesis. I read it for a video. I didn't love it, but I will say like it's not problematic. I read it and I enjoyed it. The Love Hypothesis is an AU fanfiction. So instead of Kylo Ren being a emo warlord trying to enact genocide on the galaxy, and Rey is a scavenger, and they're also brother and sister, or like cousins, I guess. Ali Hazelwood utilizes the alternate universe trope, and instead of them being, you know, intergalactic warring Jedi, they are working in a science lab. This is a great use of the AU trope because instead of making Kylo Ren a fascist and a warlord, he's just like a grumpy guy. And instead of making them cousins, they're not. So it's like actually using alternate universes as a way to make the fan fiction less problematic and weird, which is great. Why published fan fiction sells. So I feel like through that very academic and intense overview, we've shown through empirical data that published fan fiction sells, regardless of whether or not you think it's good. All of those books cleaned up. They're in a series, or the author has written a shit ton of more books because of it, and they've gotten movie deals. Like, these books do well. I did some research online to kind of see, like, obviously we're not gonna be able to like get cold hard facts as to why these books sell well, but even what the public opinion is, a general consensus that I see in a lot of fan forums and people who really have a distaste for published fan fiction seems to be that they utilize the IP that they're based on. So these things sell well, much in the way that like reboots sell well because they have the existing fan base behind them. And I just don't think that's true. Not to be a contrarian, when publishing houses publish these fan fictions, they can't make a press release that's like based on Star Wars because Disney will sue them. And also there's a process called filing the serial numbers off that published fan fiction writers have to do, in which they go through and, you know, change all the names, change anything that implies or alludes to the fact that it exists based on intellectual property that isn't theirs. Changing Harry Styles' name to Harden. Maybe there are a couple fans of the fanfic that want to buy the copy of the book so that they can like own it, but like that's not enough to earn Penguin Random House $12 million. In order for it to be financially viable for these fan fictions to be published anyway, they have to exist outside of the fandom that they exist in. I think the reason that they sell well, quite honestly, is because they appeal and are marketed to a large market. They appeal to new readers, people who aren't intense readers and they just want to read for fun, and also they're marketed to young women who run the economy. Like, whether or not you think these books are good, I mean, if we're talking about After by Anna Todd, they're not good. Like, a lot of them are not well-written pieces of literature, but they are engaging. They're easy to read. They're not intimidating to new readers. They're the kind of thing that somebody who doesn't read consistently can pick up at the airport and get into and not feel excluded or stupid. They're just very easy and like have a mass appeal to people beyond like, you know, literary fiction, let's say. These books like exist to me in the world of Colleen Hoover. Are they literature? Like, no, but also like people fucking love them, and there's merit to the popularity that they have, regardless of whether or not you like agree with the content. Also, they're marketed to the most voracious consumer base that we have, women. Literature loves to exclude young women. Women are not seen as the canon in most, if not all, novels. Like, it has to sell to men, and these releases are almost exclusively promoted to women. So that's why they do well. I think a lot of people get really like tripped up on the idea of just reading for pleasure only, not for, you know, learning or having your world rocked or whatever. Like, some people just read to enjoy themselves. I can't relate. I have to read so everyone knows that I'm better than them. But other people read just to enjoy themselves. And that's okay. Things can be bad. You know what I mean? Like, it's not a crime to like kind of be a poorly written book that's really entertaining. I feel that way about movies. Like, I will watch any bad rom-com. I do not care. Like, but I will consume it like it is made for me because I enjoy it. After by Anna Todd and Wuthering Heights are technically both books in the same way that like I now pronounce You Chuck and Larry and Shawshank Redemption are also both movies. I'm just gonna say that. Not everything has to aim to be the height of artistic expression and say something new. Sometimes things can just be fun to consume. But I do have a problem with it. I have a bone to pick. This is not just going to be a positive video. Like, I have shit to say. It's not that they're poorly written or that they sell well or that there's like some fear that that's the only way they're going to publish books from now. It's just going to be fanfic. Like, it's not. You know what I mean? Like, we can all calm down. My problem with published fanfiction is that oftentimes it has harmful ideals and depictions of abusive relationships, and their audience is almost entirely young women who are impressionable. And I think a lot of publishers and writers of these problematic tropes like do not see the responsibility that they have to address these things. When a fan fiction is written only for the internet and it has these problematic depictions, it still exists in a niche. It still exists like online too. Like, I don't know. I saw Two Girls, One Cup when I was like 10 years old. The shit I've seen online. So like, even though these stories have problematic depictions of power and relationship, it also is like on the wild west that is the internet. So like, what can you do? The problem is when these works get published, exposed to a large audience, marketed to that large, young, impressionable audience, and money is earned off that young, impressionable audience, and the author, publishing house makes no effort to change, educate, comment on the harmful things that these books are pushing to young women and young people in general. After by Anna Todd, I am looking at you. This is just about you. If you are making money off of young people, you, hot take, I guess, as a publisher, as a fucking corporation with lots of money, have a responsibility to ensure that you're not just feeding them harmful message after harmful message. I guess that's a hot take. You're making money off of them. You're already putting in the effort to, you know, file the serial numbers off and change the names. You're not going to figure out how to comment on the fact that this is a harmful depiction of abuse or change plot points, or even just in the way that, you know, something like 13 Reasons Why, when they put it on Netflix and there is some really tough subject matter, a trigger warning of any kind, anything to ensure that people aren't just picking this book up, reading it, seeing these horrific depictions of abuse in a relationship being shown as love, and it's okay. Like, when we're talking about published fan fiction, if I had a child, I would not let them read something like After, and it's not because it's like a shitty book, you know what I mean? It's not because it's poorly written. I don't care. Like, I read the Warrior Cat series. Like, you know, what's the fucking cultural merit in those? A lot. It's not because it's poorly written, it's because it communicates to readers that not only is this an okay way to be treated, to be controlled by your partner, and for somebody to hurt you over and over again to be shown as love, but also that that's okay to treat other people that way. It's fucked up. I just think it's grossly negligent when you publish something like After, to not comment, to not aim to fix, or to not even aim to just like some way rectify the fact that you are literally spoon feeding your audience of teenage girls a story of abuse depicted as love, and you're just making money off of them. Like, I just think that that is disgusting. Like, you cannot profit off of your audience, especially if they are a voracious consumer group like young women, and not also understand that with that consumer base comes a responsibility to help them out, to communicate good ideas to them. That's all I have to say this week. Hope you enjoyed this video. All my shit will be in the description below, my Instagram, all that stuff. Again, if you want to come out and see the live Twilight screening I'm hosting, come on out. The link is in the description below. I'll see you soon. Bye.